when a severe 6-day dust storm threatens to topple a NASA rocket on Mars. The mission commander orders an immediate evacuation. But as the crew rushes to the launch pad, a heavy satellite antenna breaks off in the wind, impaling astronaut Mark Watney and instantly knocking out his suit's vitals. Assuming he's dead, the crew is forced to launch and leave him behind. Hours later, Watney wakes up. He drags himself back to the empty base camp, pulls a piece of shrapnel out of his abdomen, and staples his own wound shut. He is alive, but he is completely alone on a barren planet, millions of miles from the nearest human being. This timeline shows his immediate survival math. Even if NASA somehow discovers he is alive and immediately launches a rescue mission, orbital mechanics dictate it will take a minimum of 4 years for a ship to reach him. Watney totals up the crew's leftover rations and realizes he only has enough food to last 1 year. The math is absolute. He will starve to death 3 years before help arrives. The variables only get worse. The storm destroyed the primary communications dish, so he cannot tell Earth he is alive. And the artificial habitat he is sitting in was designed for a 31-day mission, meaning its life support systems are virtually guaranteed to fail over a multi-year timeline. Hoping for a miracle is a death sentence. To stay breathing, Watney has to strip away the panic, look at his impending death as a series of solvable scientific equations, and figure out a way to hack the planet. The first problem is caloric. He needs to grow crops. But Martian soil is completely sterile. It lacks the natural bacterial and organic nutrients required to sustain plant life. Watney takes a massive risk. He hauls Martian dirt into the habitat and mixes it with the crew's vacuum-sealed biological waste. The overwhelming stench is a byproduct of the bacteria he is reintroducing to the soil. He cuts up a few whole potatoes he found in the pantry and plants the pieces in his makeshift indoor farm. To make them grow, he needs water. Since he has the equipment to extract pure oxygen and hydrogen, he decides to burn them together to create controlled condensation. It is a highly volatile reaction. He miscalculates the oxygen levels on his first attempt and blows himself backward in a fiery explosion. He adjusts his formula and tries again. Slowly, moisture begins to bead on the plastic tarps. A few days later, the very first green sprout breaks through the red dirt. That single sprout eventually yields a harvest of 600 potatoes. By leveraging basic biology and chemistry against a dead environment, Watney successfully manufactured the one resource he needed most to survive: time. Back on Earth, satellite monitoring experts analyzing orbital images of the landing zone notice that solar panels have been cleaned and a rover has moved. The realization hits the agency like a shockwave. Mark Watney is alive. Knowing NASA must be watching, Watney packs his rover and drives for 60 days across the freezing surface. To survive the sub-zero nights, he digs up a highly radioactive isotope generator and puts it inside his cab for heat. His target is the Pathfinder probe, a robotic lander whose battery died decades ago. He hauls it back, hooks it to his base's power, and the camera reactivates. This diagram shows a circle broken into 16 segments. Messages take hours, and the camera can only point at signs. Watney places hexadecimal numbers around it. NASA points at a number, and Watney converts that value into ASCII code to spell out words. Transforming the physical movement of a broken camera into a complex data flow allowed him to text message the brightest minds on Earth. His situation shifted from a solitary struggle into an active global rescue operation. But Mars is unforgiving. The canvas airlock on the habitat has been used far beyond its design limits. Suddenly, it tears, and the massive pressure difference violently ruptures the structure. The explosive decompression throws Watney backward, and the freezing Martian atmosphere kills his entire potato crop instantly. Panicking, NASA rushes an unmanned resupply rocket to the launch pad to send him food. In their haste to bypass safety checks, the rocket violently explodes seconds after liftoff. Watney's food supply is permanently capped, and he is entirely out of options. Watching the disaster unfold on international television, the China National Space Administration steps in. They offer NASA a classified booster rocket, sacrificing their own secret program to give the rescue mission a second chance. This trajectory line outlines an astrodynamic strategy called the Rich-Purnell maneuver. Instead of landing the returning Hermes spacecraft on Earth, the crew uses the planet's gravity as a slingshot, picking up massive speed to whip around and accelerate straight back toward Mars. To meet them in orbit, Watney has to use a pre-positioned Mars ascent vehicle, but the ship is too heavy to escape Martian gravity. He strips out the control panels, removes the heavy passenger seats, tears away the safety plating, and detaches the front nose cone, leaving him strapped into an open-air rocket. Survival now depends on completely abandoning standard safety protocols, trusting a canvas tarp to hold atmospheric pressure, and relying entirely on extreme theoretical physics. The launch is brutal. The canvas tarp shreds, and Watney blacks out from the G-forces, but the stripped-down vehicle successfully reaches orbit. However, he is completely stationary, and the Hermes spacecraft is passing him with a 68-kilometer gap between them. Distance isn't the real killer here. Velocity is. The Hermes is moving 42 meters per second faster than Watney's pod. If they try a physical tether catch at that relative speed, the impact will tear the astronaut in half. They need to bleed off speed immediately. Commander Lewis builds a homemade chemical bomb and detonates it inside the ship's forward airlock. The violent expulsion of internal oxygen acts as a massive reverse thruster, forcibly slowing the spacecraft down. The blast brings them closer, but the gap is still too wide. So Watney takes a knife and intentionally punctures his own pressurized suit glove. He points his arm backward, using the escaping air from his life support system as a miniature jetpack to propel himself across the void. Commander Lewis secures her tether, floats out into the gap, and successfully grabs him. He is pulled back into the Hermes airlock. Shrinking a millions of miles gap to a few final meters required the crew to weaponize the vacuum of space that was trying to kill them. Back on Earth, NASA headquarters and the rest of the watching world erupts in celebration. After hundreds of days completely isolated on a lethal planet, Mark Watney finally sits safely surrounded by his crew. Bringing him home required farming in dead dirt, rewiring a frozen robotic relic, launching a classified international booster, and executing flawless orbital mechanics under extreme duress. Enduring impossible odds doesn't require superhuman endurance. It simply requires an absolute refusal to panic. You look at the cold, hard math of a lethal situation, you solve one problem, and then you solve the next, until you find your way back home.